Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to another Systemic Energetic Awareness Forum podcast where I will contemplate on compassion and frustration and how these two things can reach their midpoint, where they can create synergy. And for those of you who have just stumbled upon this one and not familiar with my material, I am licensed psychotherapist. I've been working with people since 2007. I have also worked as a capacity of clairvoyant and a healer, and have made the whole academy. And I have a background in business and other levels of faculties, such as a bachelor degree in theology and several different types of course material, from where I am trying to create a new thought process and new thought system of expanded awareness and what it actually means to unfold our true capacities and our full capacities as higher advanced beings that used to be part of this solar system. And I'm here not saying beings as in weird light bodies, but actually talking about advanced civilizations that used to inhabit our solar system. And there are many different layers to this angle of work, which I unfold in many different directions. But for those of you who listen to how past lives can affect us in the now and the upcoming material, well, I'll do some course material on how we actually work with past life trauma and past life inner work, so that we can clear out our connection points to the different timelines that these past lives are connected to. I want to hear and work a little bit within the concepts of the Buddhist ideas of the practitioner of the path of liberation, which, you know, those of you who have listened to the Past Lives podcast and other places, as well as in my podcast series on my take on Buddhism, you recall and remember that I have had a past life, a very vivid remembrance of a past life as a Buddhist monk that met his final stages under the brutal hands of a Chinese soldier in 1959, and the different things that have come of that, including when I began doing meditation work. It was very easy to me because it was just like going back into something I had already practiced to a very large degree, but in a different manner than what I can see put out there in the newer lines of thought, or what I have looked into. And of course, I have not looked into everything there is. On the contrary, I was just working with the way I practiced it, that were focused on the heart field and focused on, to begin with, compassion as a means to level out and balance all of the turmoil and come to the observer point from where I would begin to work with the light in the head, which I just knew that was the main goal of my meditation. Activate the heart field, lift the energies of the heart field to the mind field, from where I could activate the center point that would then begin to kickstart the higher order structural layers of the human brain. So I kind of knew that was what I was doing. So I didn't need to look into all of the different aspects of Buddhism and the understanding of it, other than what I had studied as part of my college degree, as part of own self-studies, as well as later on in different contexts and variations as I studied Buddhism and the Kabbalah and the esoteric teaching systems and the Blavatsky material and a lot of other stuff to try and find the answers, and a lot of old texts, both within what we call the mystics of Judea, as well as the Magis of the Chaldea in Ur, and as well as other places, trying to find what are the answers, what have they been working with, what are we dealing with here, what are the different schools of enlightenment systems, to put it that way, different forms of enhancement systems that we can work with to activate our true energy system, and unfolding into the final steps where I have created my entire concepts and work, progression work, where I have developed a teaching system that fuses the psychological dynamics, the psychodynamics of the psyche, the healer work, the clairvoyant work, the studies I have made, my own experiences, my work with clients, my experience with people when I was healing them, bringing them back into their past lives, and all of these different steps of understanding of many, many years of different types of work, leading to certain perceptions, certain ideas, which I then made my own and created a system of thought regarding this. So thereby, it's not just a replication of what others have done. It is per definition and to its core my system of thought and what I have developed. But everybody's always building on who has gone before us, and we should respect our forefathers and those who have gone before us and trotted the path of liberation, because this is what it is. It is a path that we can aspire to get on board, and then we will sojourn with the other travelers as we develop our consciousness structure, trying to find what is the highest potentials that we have as individual beings on the path of liberation, which means that each and one of us will find our own version of the path, as well as our own version of what is the point of walking the path and what does liberation mean to us, and what is liberation in the manner of our energy system and higher order awareness that goes into, as I see it, these advanced civilizations that worked in a completely different way, which is some of the future work that I would love to do. But the sciences that they were working with are so far beyond what we know, and has very little to do with the cultural settings and the mindsets of the human civilizations that existed some 3,000 years ago, when we had more or less 500 BC. That's what science tells us, where we had the origin, or the originator, the first practitioner of the path of liberation, as he got in contact with older beings, some of the old, I don't even know what I would call them, because they were not called the Buddhas, but there are this realm where these very ancient beings exist, and I have had an experience with them lately, including entering the void and other places due to my many years of practice, not in this life, but in that previous lifetime. So it is kind of recall of things that were already embedded into my energy system, and by that reconnecting to the practice that I used to have back then. And that was a different path, as I said, than what I've seen out there. But there are similarities. There are always similarities. So when I now begin to work with this whole concept of how to, I'm not going to say merge compassion and frustration, but we kind of have this idea that when we work with the ideas of self and self-identification, and we work with the concepts of, if I as a human being exist inside this realm, which I know to a large degree is some sort of illusion, whether it's an illusion that's actually physically out there as an illusion, or it is an illusion because my perception of it is based upon my ideas and my concepts and my constructs of reality, which then makes it my personal illusion because I have created a version of reality that I feel comfortable with. That's called a comfort zone and cognitive schemata in psychology. Well, then we don't want that to be breaking down. Or if that is broken down, then we get frustrated because then reality is not in alignment with who and what we are. Then we have cognitive dissonance, as in, I made this great concept of what I wanted to achieve, what I saw reality to be, and now others are not doing, or reality is not doing, or not living up to my expectations. And then we get frustrated. So we know these concepts from the Buddhist line of thought, that the ideas that goes with that everything is changeable, everything is permeable, everything always, it rises and it falls. It's a series of experiences. It changes all the time. So there's really no point in clinging on to our ideas of what we want it to be and identify ourselves with it. Instead, we just go in and say, this is an experience. And here is where I put my things in. I'm putting that in, that instead of just having the observer point and being mindful, present in the now and just observe what's going on in the experience, because of who and what I am, the way I work, I would say, well, that experience at that moment in time is a possibility of developing our energy system by interacting with different forms of energy that can be transformed into a higher potential or a higher viability rate, as is so fancily put in my language. So that means that all of the experience is not just enough to observe them and be neutral in them and find the balance point. For me, it's all about taking these two oppositions and find the synergy of them, understanding each and one of them to the core of what they are, going into what is the complete understanding of compassion, what is the complete understanding of frustration. Why do I get frustrated? What are the dynamics, the psychodynamics behind frustration, but also what are the psychodynamics behind compassion? Why do I feel a need for compassion? Why is it important to do compassion? And perhaps loving kindness is actually a better word, but what is loving and what is kindness and what does that mean? And then go into each and one of them and saying, what does it actually mean to be loving? What are the understanding of loving, caring, kindness? Is that a type of respect? And there's a lot that in itself is a whole podcast series where we can discuss what that is. And frustration is a whole podcast series on its own where we can discuss what that is. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to our personal experiences and some kind of notion of concepts. And that's an illusion too. So all of these concepts, all of these notions, all of these ideas, all of these deliberate explanations that we put onto the different words that we are engaging ourselves within to try and understand who we are and what others are and what reality is, are just another set of construction. They are another set of illusion. So that's why when we talk about these trying to work with concepts, the way I propose this, that we work with them as a type of energy, and by that go into the still point where we're just, it's called standing erect, where we're just completely in that still point where we align our heart field and our mind field and create that specific type of light that unfolds the higher order capacities, and then feel in with the vibrational state of what does it mean to be frustrated and the vibrational state of loving kindness. And then see them as not only as psychodynamics, but also psychic energetic features that has an effect on our energy system, that has an effect on our personality structure, that is part of tailoring us into a different type of human being that responds in different ways, so that when we do feel frustrated, right there, we do not cling on to the frustration, but there we do observe the frustration. But at the same time, we investigate, what is the frustration? Where has it come from? What is it doing to me? What are the electrochemical processes here? Why do I feel the frustration? Not for blame and shame, or to beat ourselves down or say, you're not allowed to be frustrated, whatever, because you're this good practitioner. No, this is about going and say, why do you get frustrated? Why do I get frustrated? Not you, but why do I get frustrated? And then go through the different steps. Is it because my cognitive scheme matters? Is it because I create this belief system? Is there something in my perception that is now being triggered there? Is it a childhood trauma? Is it a past life trauma? Where does that frustration arise from? What is the root of it? Not as a cause and effect, because for me, if a cause can just be right here in the moment you hear a sound and then you get annoyed, so that's a cause and effect. So it's more, it needs to go deeper than what's the root of it. That means to go entire, that's the past lives and the travel back, going deeper and deeper and deeper in contemplation, meditation, to find what's the root of this frustration. What is it actually? Where did it arise the first time? That's the root. So that can be so far back into the existence of our solar system. Some of the things I'm frustrated about today actually ties back to when I was part of the Pillar Project under some of the developmental program, holographic science, evolutionary path development. Oh, I'm going to say something else. So just bear, because I'm not going to go there right here. So thereby I stumble upon the words here. Not getting frustrated, just acknowledging the fact that my brain is crashing because that's not where I want to go. That's not the line of thought I want to investigate here. And my brain works very specifically within different boxes. So when I try to go from one box to another one, then my brain has a tendency to say, yeah, that's not where you want to go. And then my left hemisphere, the speech center will not, I think it's called Broca area, right? It will not really collaborate with that level of information. So this is just to show another way of working with all of the different emotional reactions we have. But frustration can be more than just a spur in the moment emotional reaction to something that's happening or being ignited either from external or internal factors. Internal, past life, psychodynamics, this life, past life, earlier lives, what have you, and external from other beings, from other living humans, so to speak, and dead humans too, because they are there too. We have got the ones that are in form and outside of form, the shells, the ghosts, whatever, stuck on the different planes of our reality that we will encounter in our inner work. But they can also be very tangible. They can be jumpers from other people. We can have encounters with people right there in front of us, which we can have this nicest conversation with a person. Everything should be non-frustratable, so to speak, to use that word. Nothing should lead to frustration, and yet you were still frustrated. That could be entities, that could be entities in the field of the person we're talking with, which the people or the person that we talk with often are not aware of, other than having these emotional fluctuations that could be tied to this entity as it wants more energy or stir up circumstances that affects us in different levels and forms. So that's a very expanded spectrum of what can frustration be, from our personal ideologies to interaction with entities from other dimensions, right? So we are having that's the huge spectrum when we talk about frustration. So what is frustration? And going into label it and say it's this or that and classify it, that's just another construction. Let's just have that open, say frustration is a type of energy where whatever's going on makes us feel uncomfortable. Okay. So what is the root of that uncomfortableness? So we figure out what's the process and how do we clear it and how do we transform it? And once we transform that frustration and go deeper and deeper and deeper, what I propose here is that the top of that one is actually a kind of a drive to want to make change. And that change, what does that change mean? Is it a change that comes from our own inner human that says, now you have become too rigid. So whatever you're looking at, whatever you're perceiving, whatever your interaction with, you're now creating cognitive dissonance because you're so rigid in your perception of reality that the energies you have no longer match what is outside. And by that creates discord or frustration. Or is it a frustration that arises because you're picking up on another person's frustration, and then you, as an empath and as a sensitive human working with energy, will then think it's your own frustration. But what is that frustration? So the frustration is something that doesn't add up. Let us just put that an open explanation as well. Something that doesn't match, something that feels uncomfortable, something that is in a discord, something that is out of balance, something that is not aligned with the circumstance or who you are, who they are, or whatever's going on. And then find the root of that one and transform it and see it as a potential and a possibility to engineer and create change. And at the same time, then the question comes up, what type of change? In what manner should we change frustration into some kind of dynamic that will lead to a new outcome, that will lead to some kind of change? What is the higher equivalent to frustration? Yes, frustration could be very low-leveled, emotional, base program, human-driven, but frustration can also actually go into a higher purpose and function of what we say, some of the original layers of our energy system and the original layers of our consciousness structures. Not necessarily what we call higher self, because that's not, I don't operate with that, but all of the different versions we have been in this life and past lives and systems and other systems and what have you, because we have got a long line of different experience and different expressions of consciousness and energy in different organic forms, non-organic forms, semi-organic forms, full organic forms, what have you, in different realities composed of different types of energy. So we have many different variations of who are we and what are we, and that's why it's pointless to try and say I am this, because what are we really when we expand our full capacity of experiences and who and what we have been? Then we'll see we have been so many that it is pointless to try and say what we are. So by that, I'm working with a different angle and say, what is our original purpose and function? And for me, that goes with the highest trinity structure of our consciousness structure. That goes with why we're here to begin with. Why did we enter into this universal cycle? As well as what in the Bela material is called a love, wisdom, and intelligent energy. And she calls it will, intelligent energy, and love, wisdom. And the will is the highest level of our consciousness structure, where we will ourselves into existence. We have the intelligent energy, that is the reality fields we're working in, or the worlds we are part of, or the fields of energy that we are trying to transform. That's part of a previous universal cycle. I agree on that one. And then there is the wisdom, loving wisdom, or wisdom, sorry, I forgot. It is loving kindness in its essence, but it's worded in a different way. And it goes with that to truly be loving, you have to have the wisdom of what you're actually dealing with, because only if you truly know what you're dealing with can you have the accurate type of loving That means sometimes it's tough love and sometimes it's compassion. Sometimes it's supportive love. Sometimes it is the reconstruction love. There are many different ways of what does love mean. Doesn't love in its essence means to bring whoever's in front of you to his or her highest capacities, right? Whatever that means. And sometimes that is through a crisis and sometimes it is through compassion and onward and so forth. And then there is this kind of kindness that always goes within that encounter, in that meet up with that person or being or reality itself. We are always having the approach of being in what does it mean to be kind? Kind means to be open, to be receptive, to be investigative, to be curious, to try and create the best outcome, to be, assertive, to use that word, to focus on how do we create communication, how do we solve this, how do we find solutions, how do we leave this meeting with the highest outcome for both of us in that meeting that we have had without creating more negative energy, more distortion and feeling down or uncomfortable, but actually have created a kind of scenario where people will leave this encounter and you will as well, being in balance and being in harmony, have learned something, have had an expansion of who and what you are, actually has built more into your understanding of reality. And that can be little things. It doesn't have to be the big kaboom. It can be little simple things as how do you deal with your iPhone or something like that, because that can be made into a transformative experience as well. But it can also lead to frustration, right? So this, if we're going with the expectations and they are not met, well, then we get frustrated, right? So this is part of when we go in and, for instance, do the iPhone thing, we go in, we need to get our iPhone repaired. If we go in with the loving kindness and the wisdom and see who's back on the other side of the counter, what am I dealing with here, being present in the now, being mindful of what's going on, knowing exactly what type of human you're dealing, what's behind the human, what's the environment, what's going on there, and have that balance point of kindness, as in I'm not here trying to stir up negative energy or anything. I'm just here to get my phone fixed. I'm just here open and receptive to whatever's going on, being mindful so that the words I'm saying, so the way I act, the energy I send out are harmless. Because here we have an interaction that goes around the iPhone and nothing else is needed. And yes, I can see that the other one on the other side of the counter is busy and has a lot of frustration. So what is the right approach for me? Is it to add in more frustration for that person, more stress, or is it to be patient? Or what's the right approach here to balance that out so that we will have that meetup that will perhaps not make that person feel better, but at least to not add more to it so that we are harmless in that situation. So there are different angles to the loving kindness. Sometimes we actually go in and create something where people will feel better if that is the right thing to do in that moment. And other times we just go in and make sure that we are harmless so we don't add more to whatever's going on there. And that actually also includes if we come in and a person is overly happy, well, then the balance is actually the best approach there and not adding more to that happiness, because that happiness might not have anything to do with what we perceive as happiness, but that's the happiness for that person. And if we try to go in and amplify that, then our perception of happiness might not match that person's happiness. And then instead of amplifying it and give more of it, then it just makes it 10 times worse. So there has to be an understanding of energy and energy exchange when we're dealing with humans and other life forms, be it a plant or a tree or a dog or a cat or a critter or whatever it is. There are many different versions how we can perform these different types of interaction potentials with other existences that are part of our reality field. So in that understanding, that's why I want to push a little bit out of compassion, because compassion is, again, that's a word in itself that we can go in feeling with, understanding what we're dealing with, having the empathic, sensitive understanding of what is. But then most empaths and people that are working, many of them have not trained themselves as a kind of psychotherapist and know how to actually respond to that sensitivity, and that what they're sensing, what they're feeling, what's going on is part of also being clairvoyant, which I work with for many years. As in, yes, I might be able to see that, but when I convey it to the person, I need to be completely, what is the purpose of what I'm conveying? What should that person hear from me? How can I put it in words that that person will understand, and by that being concord with? And what is the purpose of what I'm sharing, and why has it been shown to me? Not as in me valuing it or rating it as being good or bad or anything, but just going in and say, okay, I got this information. What is the purpose of this information? If it is some kind of gestalt or some kind of entity that just needs to be released because that's one of the functions I have as well, well, then there's no point for me to share that with that person, because some of the things I'm seeing are pretty scary. And if that person doesn't need to know that, and that thing just presents itself because it wants to be released, then what's the point about talking about it? Unless we are, of course, in a healing situation or a psychotherapeutics session where we then begin to investigate, could that entity actually have amplified some emotional patterns, some cognitive schematics, created some kind of distortion? But then we're dealing with a person that is doing inner work, that is doing clearing work, and has an understanding of how to work with him or herself to upgrade their energy system. So these are different angles of perception of when to do what and how to do what and in what manner to do what. And that's also part of compassion. And that is also part of wisdom. So you understand when to feel with in the right manner, and when to amplify and when not to amplify, and when to be harmless and when to just observe and when to interact, and all of these different variations there is when you work with energy. So it is a very, very, that's why it's often referred to as a mastery of energy and consciousness. It is not a simple thing. It's not just done from a normal human-based program perception of reality. It must be from all levels of what we're actually dealing with, and that means a multidimensional aspect and perception that goes in and interprets on all different levels, but not from what we want it to be, but actually from what is the information system itself telling us what's going on, seeing things as they truly are, not what we want them to be, but what is actually there, what is presenting itself, and what is that, whatever we get from that outside encounter, what is being presented to us. And even that can also be, for instance, if we talk about encounters with entities, they have this idea of who and what they are, but we still must take in face value what they present to us, but they are, unless, as I have worked with many different entities, when I release them, then I can work through their layers, and eventually they discover, oh, I'm actually something completely else, but I lost myself in these realms of distortion and have taken form after the distortion by that lost sight of who and what I actually am, not as in I am this or I am that, but the root of their existence, when they entered into this cycle and when they entered into our solar system. That would be a root, for instance, what they came to be here and what the purpose were when they came here. So that's a part of that process. So with these short versions of it, very complex, very narrowed down into frustration and compassion, then how do we create synergy? And this is where I deviate from the Buddhist line of thought, without going. I'm here relying on what I will remember as how I used to work with oppositions in the balancing as a Buddhist monk. And of course, I didn't call myself a Buddhist monk. I called myself a practitioner on the path of liberation, right? So how would I balance that one? And I'm not going to go into my past life as in kind of in the moment of my death and the extreme torture, because we could definitely say there was very high levels of not frustration, but understanding, but there was no compassion, because the compassion was not adequate in that situation. There was nothing to feel my compassion. There's nothing to be compassionate with. So thereby there was only harmless. And I ended up, the only solution I could come out of that, the only transformation point in that situation, the only point where I could go with that experience and what was going on and what was done to my body and my entirety, was to go into the void. So that is a different approach. That is not synergy, where you take these opposition and try to create compassion or frustration, what have you, and go into synergy. That is a complete transmutation. So that's something else. And that goes with what we call polarity, where people say opposition. Isn't it the same as polarity? No, polarity is a vertical thing where you either go extremely high and transmute, or you go extremely low and evaporate. Whereas opposition is where you can transform the dynamics as part of a spectrum, and it works with your heart field. So that's where the opposition comes in. And that can sometimes happen via a crisis that breaks down our ideas and belief systems, because that's what a crisis is. That is when our own old constructions deconstruct. That's a crisis. But it can also be compassion, and that's why we align with what is going on in that spectrum on all levels, so that we really feel and see and sense how that aligns with our heart field in a manner that creates resonance. So I would rather say compassion could also be interpreted as resonance. And I'm here saying energetic resonance, not mental construction, word resonance. Oh, I can align with that, what you're saying there. No, this is energy. We're sensing energy with our heart field. And that is, for me, what the true compassion is. It's a heart field that has its own life, that goes in and vibrates with energy and know exactly here to vibrate up, here to vibrate down, here to become harmless, here to share, here to amplify, here to create these wave patterns that will create harmony, here not to do that, here to stand back. There's a lot of things that the heart field would do on its own, because it's a kind of a mechanism similar to when our heart beats. The heart itself, the physical heart itself, has a lot of functions, right? But the heart field is tied to our energy system, is connected to what we call the resonance fields and the vibrational state of our reality, where it amplifies energy or are harmlessly non-engaging in the different forms of energy. So it has very little to do with our personal perception of what reality is. And that's, for me, the true understanding of compassion. Because there we actually work with the heart field energies in that loving kindness, where it goes in and actually creates a change and creates a transformational process. How do we then add in frustration into that equation? Well, if we, instead of saying frustration as in kind of something that I am in discord with because I want to have my will pushed through, and go in the observer point and say, okay, here's a need for change, whatever that is. And we run through the full spectrum of from what is it for me, why is it there, and all of these things. And we learn to do that pretty efficiently as you work more and more with these skill sets. That is part of what it means to work with, truly work with energy and to transform energy and upgrade your energy system. Then we can go in and say, okay, from that level of frustration and the path into working with the different levels of it, the spectrum of it, transforming it, finding the root of it, and then come in connection with your original purpose and function. Then it suddenly ties into not just will. I have kind of put that differently, not doing the Bailey, will, intelligent energy, and love, wisdom, but actually go in and say, no, for me, there is will, absolutely, because that's why we willed into existence. That's why we're here. That's why we came here. We had a purpose and a function. That's what we call will. But there is also this kind of commitment. I call it vow, as where we commit to transform energy. So that's at least part of who I am. That's part of my entire existence. I exist to transform energy. That's why I'm here. That's part of my original purpose. Ignite, transform, transmute, transcend, and create something new. And then there is honor. And for me, if you say, where would I put frustration? Is it the will or is it the vow? Well, it can be that as a kind of, I want to do this and I can't do that. So thereby I get a little bit frustrated. But then I shifted into the other part of the Trinity. And that's honor, because honor comes in and if you want me to explain what honor is, I'll say I can't, because it's part of my heart field. It's part of my entire core essence, as in knowing when to do and knowing when not to do. That's also what's called being humble, knowing when to act and when not to act, knowing when to engage and knowing when not to engage. And what is the purpose of this either or, engage or non-engage, being or being not, or acting not, or what have you? That is that honor that goes with the understanding of what is actually going on here. And here we're talking a higher order capacity. We're talking consciousness on one of its highest levels, as in what is the right thing to do here. Not from a human-based program perception of what's right and wrong in our value system and dichotomies of what we've been taught in religion or ethics or moral, what have you, or I feel this or that or whatever, therefore it feels right for me, I feel it in my gut because it matches my personality structure. It's so much larger than that. It is like the understanding of being completely in connection with the reality itself that we are part of living entities transforming the entire reality to its highest potentials. And there we go in and say, okay, so what does that mean? As I explore and develop the reality field I'm part of that is made of energies of a previous universal cycle, but at the same time also having its purpose and function that is embedded into the reality itself by the natural universal laws of energy and consciousness, well, then honor will be to be in alignment with our reality, to be in completely harmony with the radiation and vibrational fields, with the sound and light fields, with the code streams of the world that we are part of. And as we stand there and stand truly sovereign, then we also understand what honor is, because honor is not our personal, I want to clear my name or what have you, low base program variations of it. No, honor is that when you stand completely aligned with the reality field purpose and function, because then what you have as an individual purpose and function will align with the reality field purpose and function. And there, that synergy of these two inner outer comes so aligned that the blast that comes from that will be honor. That's a different approach to what honor is. But that's because we talk about the highest trinity structure, and we have the lower trinity structure in our biofield, emotional field, and mental field. And then we have the middle trinity structure with the three lower levels of the higher order energy system that goes with different processes and different ways of working with the vibrational field. And then we have the upper level of the higher order energy system that goes with the radiation fields. So we have in total, we have 12 different layers where we have the highest trinity and the lowest trinity and the trinity in between. And the trinity, the two trinities in between, which is the hexagram, that is the symbol of the soul, if you want to put it, that's what I call the higher order energy system. It is higher and lower forms, where the lower form is the vibrational fields and the information systems that ties into the heart field, and the higher levels of the vibrational fields that ties into the mind field. And then you have the true consciousness potentials of the top trinity, and then you have the organic form as the lowest trinity. So these are the 12 layers in who and what we are. And that's the 12-pointed star, if you want to go into the full understanding of all of this, that ties into all 12 levels of our reality field, that ties into the 12 times 12 universal lineages, that goes into the 12 times 12 cycles, and onward and so forth. So thereby we also begin to understand that when we talk about this fusion or this merge or this synergy that actually works with the opposition in the heart field between compassion or loving kindness and frustration that goes into honor, then you suddenly, instead of having frustration, if you're in alignment with your true purpose and function and the laws of the universal structure you're part of, and work in that manner from that point of view, as in whatever I'm doing, this is for the reality field itself, then we work with the principle of the first of many for the highest good of the many, which means the highest good will always be the reality field itself. And then as everything you are doing in that understanding, follow the principles and the laws and the rules, then you will always be an honorable person. Because you're always choosing the highest good. You're always choosing that path that leads to where you will become the first of many, seeding in that version of the path that leads to the highest purity rate, the highest standards, and the highest progression rate. So that's a different approach to the path of liberation. Because what is liberation, right? Is it liberation from enslavement or all of these cultural ideas I talked about as well in the podcast series on past lives? Or is it actually liberation to reach our true potentials, to reach our highest potentials and understand what we are in its entirety on all 12 levels? Isn't that a liberation as well? The full understanding, the full seeing things as they truly are, and everything from all angles, and at the same time have the potentials to transform it and create synergy, or create the transcendent dynamics that transmutes all energies into their highest potentials, a new type of energy that allows for a new type of consciousness from where you can excel and move between the different states of existence. Isn't that also a path of liberation? So with that question asked, so instead of starting with compassion and frustration, we are now going into this full understanding of wisdom, kindness, compassion, being present, whatever we'll come up with, but technically it goes with the full understanding of everything there is and see it as it truly is. Because what that is, what compassion should lead to, be able to see things as they truly are and not what you want them to be, because it's difficult, but what they actually are, and then respond in the correct manner so that you go in alignment and create harmony, or stand down and become harmless. And then we have frustration that in all of its processes will tell you who and what you are. The frustration can be used to personal developmental processes. It creates a crisis that opens the heart field, that opens for processes of evaluation and investigation, leading to the highest level of what you can be, and that is honor, that connection to the reality field you're part of. So there you suddenly have the opposition of honor and complete alignment with the world via the rules and the principles and the laws for the highest purity rate, for the highest standards, the highest progression rate, for the highest good of the many. And at the same time, you are seeing things as they truly are. And for me, that's the highest level when we work with the lower level compassion, so to speak, and frustration in our 3 lower fields. Then the equivalent on the higher trinity structure, which we kind of know here is between honor and the vow and the will. But the 6-layered energy system, there we go in to understand that every single layer of that must be seen things as they truly are. So we operate accurately and completely in the right manner with the energies that are in front of us. And at the same time, we're taking all of these processes using that honor aspect to it, so that whatever we will do will not be from our personal interest of who and what we think we are in the now, but will be from the point of view of what is for the highest good of the many in what I'm doing here. What is the most important approach? How do I work with this so that I honorably, sovereignly, as a sovereign, honorable being, can always be in alignment with the world that is spawning me, with the world that is energizing me, and with the world from where I have chosen to interact and have these series of experiences. So with this little process of some of my thought processes, I will hereby leave that podcast here out for contemplation and further investigation. Not giving the answers, just putting in a little bit of processes here and there, and some of the ideas that, to a degree, I think might or might not lead to further investigation and looking into some of these concepts from a new angle and a new approach, so that we don't get rigidly absorbed into the concepts of what has been made before us, but are beginning to look at things from a really mindful perspective and see things as they truly are in this time, in this age, who we are now and what we need to become, so we remember at least how it used to be as part of the solar system, and how we can regain some of the original potentials and capacities that we once had as this very, very advanced civilization that used to unfold their experiences and their transformation of energy using our solar system and the reality fields behind our solar system to do so. Thank you.